Man, a lot of video games are just too long. I know it's such a whiny, entitled thing to complain about. Oh, boo-hoo. You mean that $70 or now $80 game is actually giving you your money's worth? The horror. Now, here's the thing. Metaphor ReFantazio is a fantastic game, but wow, is it a commitment. And sometimes you just need a reprieve from that kind of a thing. Hi, folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, the 10 best single-player games that only take 20 hours to beat. Now, just as a little note to set things up here, I'm sticking mostly around stuff that takes 20 hours to finish. Not an exact science, though. I'm using a bit of my own experience, drawing on the rest of the gameranx crew's experience, and also the How Long to Beat website. It's a good baseline for the typical length of these games. It can seem wildly inaccurate based on your experience as somebody who plays games, but it's an average of all the reports. And also, the thing is, I'm going to try to stick to around 20-ish hours here. You could easily rattle off like 10 games that are 2 hours, but that's not what we're talking about. A 20-hour game is still substantial, you know? It's just not life-consuming. So without any further ado, let's start off at number 10. It's Atomfall. So this is the platonic ideal of a 20-hour video game. It's about exactly as long as it took for me to finish. I mean, not like down to the minute, but How Long to Beat has it listed as 10 hours for the main story, 25 if you're a completionist, which sounds about right. Something I legitimately appreciate about Atomfall is just how little it wastes your time. The game starts and you're straight into it with little exposition or long dialogue sequence. I mean, there is dialogue, but it's quick and to the point. Even though the game is inspired by stuff like Fallout 3 and Far Cry, it's almost got more of a Metroidvania spirit. You're spending most of the game exploring, finding clues, uncovering secrets, and like the best Vanias, you can rush straight to the ending if you want and get an unsatisfying conclusion, or you can take some time and uncover the secrets of the world before, you rush into the end and get that. It's frankly more satisfying that way. It's a game that can be finished pretty quickly if you want to just get it over with, but for the more inquisitive types, there's plenty to dig into, and it's not a drag. Like, the pacing's real good. It's not like an all-time great game or anything. There's some frustrating moments and some awkwardness to some of the combat.
We'll die.
But it's a fun and unique experience. It's pretty darn rewarding for players who like to explore and learn things. The whole investigation angle isn't just window dressing. You really do feel like you're uncovering a mystery here, piece by piece, in a way that feels natural. If you first thought seeing this game was thinking that it must be just another bloated 50-hour plus open world snooze fest, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised by how relatively quick this game goes by. It's not short, but it's way less of a time commitment than you might think based on the advertising. At number 9 is Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza of Hawaii. For as much as I've got respect for the new Yakuza protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga, his games are monsters of game. Like, the main line entries are the recent ones, like 100 hours, seriously. And if you're like a completionist, it's a lot more than that. It's crazy. The newest entry in the series is just completely absurd, though, even by the standards of the series. You play as Majima. He's lost his memories. He's somehow the captain of a pirate ship, too. And it's in modern-day Hawaii. It's not like a fever dream that's happening back in pirate times. No, you're a pirate in Hawaii now. This is canon. This game is canon. And in the canon, there are canons. Like, there's an underground society of pirates sailing around the Pacific with old-timey galleons and rows of cannons. Also, you have a rocket launcher, because why not? To the game's credit, they lean into the absurdity, and they have a ton of fun with it. And for a long-time fan, finally having a game with Majima as a protagonist, where he finally gets to be the mad dog, it's a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, he's just crazy overpowered in combat. It's a ton of fun. The game is kind of your average Yakuza story on overdrive. It's not rushed, but everything feels like it's happening way faster. And while the plot might seem like a big joke, it actually comes together into something pretty engaging and fun by the time you hit the climax. Like, no joke, it has one of the best conclusions of any Yakuza game, and I'm not kidding about that. The whole thing's a lot of fun, and you could easily blaze through it in about 20 hours if you're focusing on just the main story. This being the series that it is, you can also, spend double that if you want to complete all the mini games and do everything else. But the great thing about these games, there's no obligation. You can finish the game, take a break, come back to it later, clear it all out if you want, or you can just pick and choose the stuff you want and ignore the rest. It's all pretty fun, but there's nothing stopping you from just bouncing once the credits roll, and you'll be satisfied with what you accomplished. Moving on to number 8 is Astro Bot, where the last game took about 20 hours to finish the main story. Astro Bot can finish in like 10 hours. It's going to take 20 if you're going for completion, but it's a platformer, so getting 100% is kind of baked into the fabric of the game. It's a challenge that is worth doing, I would say, especially since you can be a completionist at 20 hours. It's not crazy. Astro Bot's also just one of those games that's worth spending the extra time with because it's fantastic. It's one of the best pure platformers in years. I don't need to explain why Astro Bot is so good. Everybody pretty much knows it. It's gotten tons of accolades. It was awarded Best Game of 2024 at that year's awards. So, people know it's good. It's a game where the core gameplay is pretty basic, but the fundamentals are so strong, the level design is so good, and the variety of activities is so perfectly calibrated. It's just a non-stop roller coaster ride. And it's entertaining from minute 1 until the credits roll. There's no epic story or deep lore or super complex mechanics to master. It's just a straight up really good game. It's not pretentious. It's made by a studio that has polished the platformer formula to a mirror sheen. And if you're a PlayStation fanboy, there's a lot of little references and deep cuts to find. It's not high art, but it's super charming. And if this were a literal best of list, Astro Bot would be number 1 or close to it. But we're just riffing here. We're having fun. So, you probably all know Astro Bot already. So, yeah. At number 7 is Tempest Rising. Something a little different, a little RTS throwback. It's got 2 campaigns, each with 11 missions that take around 10 hours to finish. So beating both campaigns gets you about 20 hours to beat the game's story, give or take. That's just about the perfect length for this hyper-specific piece of high-quality nostalgia bait. It's a game that's clearly just Command and Conquer with the serial numbers filed off and on Unreal Engine 5. But with that classic RTS franchise all but dead, outside the occasional remaster, getting anything that harkens back to the series is, it's giving air to a drowning man. Fans of Command and Conquer would take anything at this point, so it's a relief that Tempest Rising is actually quite good.
Come a little closer. Will do. With pleasure. Come a little closer. I see. I see.
The campaigns in particular are perfectly paced, full of intense missions with plenty of varied and interesting objectives, and a nice steady ramping up of difficulty that keeps you on your toes but doesn't get overwhelmingly challenging either. Like most RTS campaigns, it's essentially just really long tutorials, but the addition of extra unlockables and bonus objectives that get you additional currency to unlock powerful doctrines to customize your army, and it's all solid additions to the classic formula. Again, the talking head mission briefings, they're not as hard when they're not B-movie actors or members of the dev team chewing the cardboard sets. They're just 3D models, but their heart's in the right place, and the actual missions themselves are a lot of fun. If you're at all a fan of the old school RTS games, this game is definitely worth checking out. There have been so many attempts at RTS revivals recently, and most of them kind of suck, but this one is legit.
I see. Come a little closer.
At number 6 is AI Limit. While the first Berserker Kazan came in and soaked up most of the attention and accolades, AI Limit's another Souls-like that deserves some attention of its own. For one thing, it's much shorter. You can finish it in under 20 hours if you stick to the main quest. You could maybe give it an extra 5 to 10 if you're a completionist. That's still like half the length of Kazan. But this game is maybe a less ambitious, scrappier game, but it's got a whole lot of charm. Combat's jankier and definitely less satisfying, but the exploration and the weird world they've created here it's legitimately pretty interesting to slowly uncover, and the level design gives you just enough space to get lost in without being a confusing maze. One thing I appreciate about AI Limit is that it's not relentlessly difficult. It's closer to something like the first Dark Souls, where there's a few tough bosses, but it's not just one wall after another. Certain bosses are even fairly easy, while others will give you more of a challenge. There's more of an ebb and flow to the difficulty rather than a straight line to the top of graph. It's just a pretty solid Souls-like that ends up being more than the sum of its parts. The graphics, not super impressive. The combat can feel a little rubbery and imprecise, and the level design is clearly borrowing from other games like Nier Automata. But in the end, it comes together as something pretty interesting and unique, especially if you go through the trouble of unlocking the super secret ending, which, of course, there's one. It's Souls-like, after all. And number 5 is Eternal Strands, the middle portion list, so you know what that means. Indie-adjacent projects that are a little flawed but have a lot of heart. This is an ambitious combination of Breath of the Wild and Monster Hunter that was never going to match up to its inspirations, but nonetheless, it's a lot better than you would think. What makes the game different from other also-rans that tried to copy Monster Hunter's style is that you're not just a hunter, but also a mage. As you progress through the game, defeating beasts that sometimes feel right out of a Monster Hunter game, but also sometimes feel like the giants from Shadow of the Colossus. As you go on, you unlock new spells that allow you to command physics or elemental powers like fire and ice. Like Monster Hunters, there's a strong focus on collecting resources to upgrade equipment, but unlike Monster Hunter, you're not just exclusively fighting the big beasts. There's blueprints to find hidden stuff in each zone, smaller enemies to tangle with. There's more of an actual exploration aspect of the gameplay, and I actually like that. It's nice to take a break from all the monster slaying for once in a while. The chaotic nature of the magic system and the way each zone can have changing weather hazards, it can be annoying, but the overall package is shockingly stable for how ambitious the ideas are in relation to clear limitations in budget, let's say. It's not a great forever game like a good Monster Hunter, but it doesn't overstay its welcome and become a chore either.
That's it. Hit the exposed skin with everything you've got.
And number 4 is Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist. You know, Metroidvanias used to be short. Symphony of the Night, it's like 5 hours. Super Metroid can be blazed through if you know the correct item sequence. And none of this took a lot of time, you know? And then Hollow Knight came out and everybody had to up their game. Honestly, broad generalization on my part, but whatever. There's still a ton of short search action games that come out every year. But when you're looking at the upper echelon of quality, they're going to be hitting 20 or so in the hours mark. Like Ender Magnolia takes about 16 to 21 hours to finish, depending on your completionist tendencies. And it is just about the right length for a game like this. It doesn't drag on too long, start getting repetitive, but it doesn't feel like you're getting shortchanged either. Ender Magnolia is, it's just about the perfect sequel. It builds on the first game in some smart ways with a more interesting world to explore, some better movement abilities, more distinct and interesting zones, etc. Combat also very improved. Feels more impactful, and the boss fights are better designed. The setting's a big departure from the first game, which was more of your average dark fantasy world. This place is kind of Nier Automata-inspired robot post-apocalypse. But I respect them taking the series in a different direction, so it doesn't feel like the same thing over and over again. It's just an all-around good Metroidvania that's really worth a look if you've got the spare time. At number 3 is Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. One of those games that kind of got lost in the shuffle in 2024 because it's a great, slightly unconventional return to the classic Zelda formula that fans have been pining for since the great pivot to massive open worlds like Breath of the Wild. Classic Zelda, top-down, old-school dungeons, puzzle-solving minigames. It's all those legendary old games and one big twist. You can't directly attack anything. Well, you can. Eventually, you unlock a power-up that can temporarily give you the ability to swing a sword, but for the most part, you're relying on summoning creatures and objects to deal with enemies and solve puzzles. It's somehow both a more structured game in the series while being very free-form in how you go about solving puzzles and fighting enemies. The freedom of choice comes from what you choose to summon, because after a while, you really get a lot of options, which also leads to the game's greatest weakness, which is the menus. Having to cycle through this big list every time you want to call a bed or a moblin, it gets annoying after a while. I don't know why they couldn't include something as simple as a favorites tab or a quick select bar or something, but no, they did not. It's annoying, but you do get used to it. It's like having to pause every time you want to switch weapons on the original Resident Evil 4. It's still a great game, even if that constant stop and start gets a bit tedious after a while. At the end of the day, it's just a minor gripe because the game is so charming, so fun, and beyond creative, and it doesn't drag it down. The dungeons are super well designed. The overworld's one of the best in the entire series, and the entire gameplay gimmick is just a ton of fun. It's not a short game. Just finishing the main story will take about 20 hours or so, but it's a Zelda game. Pretty easy to beeline the main quest, and there's no punishment for doing so play it as quickly or slowly as you want. At number 2 is Indiana Jones: The Great Circle. Easy to assume that the latest Indiana Jones game would be a piece of junk. I mean, it's a franchise tie-in game. They're spotty at best, on average anyways. It was released in December, which is often considered a dumping ground for big-budget but underperforming titles, and nobody quite knew what to expect, but, I mean, it's great. I was not expecting the next big immersive sim to be a licensed Indiana Jones game that doesn't even have anything to do with anything we knew about ahead of time. It's not short either. It takes like between 15 and 38 hours. It was about 20 for me. So depending on how OCD you are, the amount of time you spent with it, it's going to change.
They misspell his name. Boss must be furious. This could be interesting.
If you're like me and you mostly stick to the big side quest of the main story, it's 20 hours. And that's just about the perfect length. You get some room to breathe. You're still having that sense of adventure and forward momentum. It's not a full open world bloat type thing going on. It's not really an open world game. It's pretty level based for the most part. Good stealth, whole lot of punching, and really not a lot of shooting. And once the guns do come out, it feels like a big deal. I never really imagined they'd make an Indiana Jones game and primary focus on stealth, but man, it works. And I mean, how much of the movie, every one of them, how many of them are how much runtime is Indy sneaking around bad guy bases and putting on disguises and stuff? It's a fair amount.
Looks like company.
And finally, at number 1, it's Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This underperforming but absolutely excellent Metroidvania was basically doomed to fail. Of course, a side-scrolling exploration platformer wasn't going to succeed when it's got Ubisoft-level expectations riding on it, but the fact this game exists at all feels worthy of celebration. Every once in a while, Ubisoft puts out something that's really interesting, and this was, I guess, the one that we got from 2024. It's a traditional Metroidvania with a unique focus on challenging platforming as befitting the Prince of Persia name. For as different as it is from any other entry in the series, the many traps you have to evade to get around this gigantic map feel right at home. Combining fluid movement and platform challenges with difficult combat, it's not exactly a new thing for these types of games, but the way Prince of Persia, which I don't understand why we don't affectionately call Pop at this point, this Prince of Persia combines both elements just seamlessly. The challenge is tuned just right, the world is super fun to explore, it's visually stunning, and the note-taking system where you can take screenshots of locations that need to be cleared and pin them to your map, it's brilliant. It should be a common feature in all Metroidvanias going forward. I don't know why nobody big has ever done it before. It seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it's a game that's just quality from top to bottom. It's just about perfect, not only in design, but also in length. You could conceivably warp through this game in about 16 hours, but I think most people are going to do it in about 20-24. You could go all the way up to 31 if you're really dedicated to finding everything. Like, this is a game that really deserves more attention. You can see where they had to cut corners in a couple of places with some portrait conversations, but the flaws are really minuscule compared to how just amazing this game really is. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. Don't forget to enable notifications. And we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter and book me on Cameo at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.